Hello, Brobs. We're back with a new book, Cawdor by Robinson Jeffers. Cawdor is the title poem of this volume, written in 1938 and published by Horace Liveright. I likely won't read the lyric poems, but definitely going to read Cawdor, which is 120 pages. Narrative style. It reads more like a novel. I will use my backup copy. As you can see, the board matches the board etching. Embossment matches the jacket, which is pretty cool. Cawdor. 1. In 1909, a fire swept our coast hills, but not the canyons oceanward. Cawdor's ranges and farm were safe. He had posted sentinels, his son George and his man Jesus Acana, on 2 hills, and they watched the fire all night stream toward Cawdor. I know that's wrong, but I'll keep reading. The big coned inland pines made pillars of white flame. Cawdor at dawn stood by his door and saw in the bronze light that leaked through towers of smoke, windowed with sanguine reflections of the burning, 2 does and a fawn spring down the creek bed stones of his ravine, fleeing from their terror, and then a tawny mountain lion with no eyes for the deer. Next walked a lame gray horse. A girl led it. A broken old man, his face bound with the dirty cloth, clung weakly to the limping withers. Cawdor recognized him, though he was faceless. Old Marshall, who had got a place in the hills 2 years before. A feeble old man marked for misfortune. His stock, the first year, sickened with lump jaw when a cow died in the creek. Marshall had let her lie there. Then Cawdor had ridden and cursed him, and Cawdor with his man Acana roped the horns to draw the carcass out of the stream. But when they drew, it burst. Now Marshall came, he and his daughter Farah, for refuge, having saved from the fire nothing but their own lives and the lame horse. The old man reeled and was dumb with pain, but the girl asked for Hood Cawdor, and Cawdor said, "Not here. He left last winter." Hood was his second son, the hunter, with whom he had quarreled, and Farah, Marshall, "We've come." One pointed toward the smoke towers. "From that, you are Hood's father. You've the same drooping eyes, like a big animal's that never needs to look sideways. I'm sorry, you'll have to take us in. My father is burnt. He is blinded. The fire was on us before we awoke. He tried to fetch a bridle out of the burning stable. There was a drum of coal oil against the wall exploded and blew fire over his face. I dragged him out of the fire. He said, 'Bring him in.' It wasn't dark," she answered. "The oaks were like torches, and all the hill roared like a wave. He says we can go in, Father. Here is the doorstep." The old man groaned, lifting his hand to his face, but not touching it, and hung back from the door. "I wish to God you had left me at home." She said, Your home? Pardon. To be a blackened log with the others, lying quiet," he said, "in the burnt hollow under the hill, and not have any cares, and not come blind, and crying to my enemy's place." He turned in her hands and said, "Oh, Farah, where is the sun? Is it afternoon?" She stood and held him. "Dear, only dawn. I think it must have come up. It's hidden in the hell of smoke." "Turn me that way before I go in, to the good light that gave me so many days. I have failed and failed and failed. Now I'll go in as men go into the grave and not fail any more." He was in fact passive from that time on, except the restlessness of pain in bed while his face scarred and the eyes died in the dark. After the pain was lulled, he seemed content with blindness. It made an end of labor. Cawdor, meanwhile, would somehow have sent him up coast to Monterey to find other charity, but the girl Farah, coming ragged and courageous out of the fire with cool gray eyes, had troubled his tough heart. He'd not seen her before that dawn, and the image of the young, haggard girl streaked with the dirt of the fire, and her skirt torn to bandage, her father's face lived like a plant in his blood. He was 50 years old and mocked at himself. She was 19, she said, but being a beggar really under the burden of that blind man to care for, discounted youth. And Cawdor, whatever the next 10 years might bring him, felt no weight in the 50. He had been stronger from his youth up than other men, and still the strength seemed to increase. The only changes toward age were harder lines in the shaven face and fewer ferocities. The black passions of anger that used to blind him sometimes had almost ceased, perhaps for lack of cause. Now the few people he dealt with knew him too well to cross him, and heed security and rough abundance to offer. When Marshall was able, Farah led him outdoors about the house to feel the sun. He said it had no solidness so near the ocean. At home in the dear cup of the hills, it used to come down like golden hammers, yet I'm content. Now it's dulled. Is there a cloud? She answered, cypresses planted around the house, but the wind has broken them, so sit on this bench by the door. Here it beats golden. He sat and soon handled the thing beside him on the warm plank. What's this thing on the bench, like a saucer with little holes? An old seashell, she answered, and abalones. They grow up on the ocean reef. All this black soil's full of their shells. The Indians brought up, he said. Farah, while we stay here, will you do something to lengthen the life you saved? When's the new moon? Go down when the tides, why are these words all together? Go down when the tides drain out in the dark of the moon, and at full moon gather me mussels and abalones. Or is it abalones? I think it's abalone. I'll drink the broth and eat the meat. It is full of salts and nourishments. The ancestors of our life came from the sea, and our blood craves it. It will bring me years of health, she answered. He wants us to go tomorrow. Go where? That I can't tell. Is the sun pleasant? Oh, we can't go, he said. You needn't be troubled. The sun is faint, but pleasant. Now is that Cawdor passing? No, Concha Rosas, she answered. She helps the cook. She helped me when you were sick. Farah, with private thoughts, watched the Indian-blooded woman about her work pass in the dooryard, and go after a moment, carrying a pan under her arm, to the half-cask against the lift of the hill, where water trickled from a wood pipe. Tall weeds and calla lilies grew in the mud by it. The dark, fat woman sat on a stone among them, paring and washing whatever was in the pan. And Farah said carefully, she has a child with blue eyes, and she is an Indian. She and the boy had their rooms in the house when we came here, but Mr. Cawdor has moved them to the old adobe outbuilding, where a Canna lives with his wife. Her father listened or not, and answered, Farah, am I still in the sun? Oh, yes, it is faint, he said, but pleasant. I suppose now you can see the ocean with golden scales on the broad blue. No, she answered, we face up the canyon toward the dark redwoods. Cawdor's daughter, Michael, is it Michael? Michael? I'm going to just say Michael. Came by, a blue-eyed girl of 14, nearly as tall as Farah. She had a trap in her hand, and a live ground squirrel dangled from it by the crushed paws. Then Farah left her father a moment to go with Michael to the eagle's cage to watch the captive be fed. Against the cypress, a wide wire-screened box, no perch in it but a wood block for the bird's wing, was broken. Hood Cawdor, Michael's brother, had shot it the autumn before he went away, and Michael had kept it alive. She laid the squirrel inside and opened the trap. The girls, their arms lacing each other's shoulders, set their faces against the wire to watch the great dark feathered and square-shouldered prisoner move in his corner. One wide wing trailed through filth, quickening a buzz of blowflies. The fierce dark eyes had dropped their films. He'll never be tame, Michael said sadly. They watched the squirrel begin to drag its body on the broken forepaws. The indomitable eyes seemed never to have left the girls' faces, but a grim hand came forward and gathered its prey under its talons. They heard a whispering twitter continue below the hover of the dark plumes until the brown hackles of the neck bowed. The bleak head stooped over and stilled it. Farah turned at a shadow and saw Cawdor behind her, who said, "One thing it's good for. It makes Michael catch squirrels. Well, Farah, you're ready to go tomorrow?" "Let me go back to my father," she said. "I've left him alone too long." "No, we're not ready." He followed her. Michael remained. She touched her father's hand and spoke of the son. Old Marshall lifted his cloth face that he wore to hide the scars. His voice dulled through the cloth. "It is faint, but very pleasant. I've been asleep." She said, "Mr. Cawdor's here, and Cawdor, how are you? Now that he's better, Farah. Little Romano, that's Concha Rose's boy, could take him walking in the afternoons and let you have a free time to ride with Michael. If you could stay here. It's pitiful to see youth chained to helpless old age. However, I have to drive to Monterey in the morning. I put it off as long as I could, and now he's able." She looked at Cawdor's face in his hands and said, "He means, Father, that we must go tomorrow. I told you." Who sighed and answered, "That would be a long journey for nothing at all. Are people more kind there? Wherever an old, pitiful, blind man goes, someone will have to lead him and feed him and find him a bed." "The world is not so made, Farah, that he could starve. There is a God, but in human kindness," Cawdor said gravely. "Now's the other fool's turn to speak it. It makes me mad to have to spread out my foolishness. I never had time to play with colored ribbons. I was brought up hard. I did a man's work at 12 and bossed a gang at 18. That gets you nowhere, I learned. That ruling poor men's hands is nothing. Ruling men's money's a wedge in the world. But after I'd split it open a crack, I looked in and saw the trick inside it, the filthy nothing, the fooled and rotten faces of rich and successful men, and the sons they have. Then I came down from the city. I saw this place and I got it. I was what you call honest, but I was hard. The little Mexican cried when I got it. A canyon full of redwoods and hills guaranteed not to contain gold. I'd what I wanted and have lived unshaken. My wife died when Michael was born, and I was sorry. She seemed frightened at the end, but life was not changed. I am 50 years old. The boys have grown up, and now I'm caught with wanting something, and my life has changed. I haven't slept for some nights. You'd think I might have been safe at 50. Oh, I'm still my own master. It will not beg anything of you. Oh, blind man, your girl's beautiful. I saw her come down the canyon like a fawn out of the fire. If she is willing, if you are willing, Farah, the place is yours. It's no palace and no kingdom, but you are a beggar. It might be better for you to live in a lonely place than lead your old blind man up the cold street and catch dimes in his hat. If you're not willing, I'll tell you something. You are not safe here. By God, you're not. I've been my own master, but now I'm troubled with two wolves tearing each other. To kneel down like a fool and worship you, and the other thing. She whitened and smiled. I'm not afraid, but I'm not experienced. Marriage, you mean? There's no security in anything less. We are, as you say, beggars. We want security. Old Marshall groped and muttered against her. She laughed. I'm driving a bargain. Be quiet, Father, Cawdor said sadly. I think that I am the one being made a fool of, old man, not you. Farah, if you were willing, we'd drive up and be married tomorrow. And then there must be something. Clothes, you look ridiculous. Bursting through Michael's like the bud. What's that? Bursting through Michael's like the bud of a poppy. She stood quietly and looked over the dooryard at Concha Rosa's peeling potatoes beside the fountain. Who's that wide-lapped dark of the moon among the lilies? He said. Why, Concha, you know her. Oh, Concha, now you've moved her out of the house? Yes, he said angrily, and Pharaoh laughing. There is nothing under the sun worth loving but strength, and I had some, but it's tired, and now I'm sick of it. I want you to be proud and hard with me. I'm not tame. If you ever soften, oh yes, to your offer. I'd a friend once that had fine dreams. She didn't look forward into her mist of moon or the roses, not roses. You remember Edith, father? With half the heart that races me to meet tomorrow. Then Cawdor shuddered with hope of love. His face, relaxing, began to look like an old man's. He stooped toward Farah to fondle or kiss. She drew herself back. Not now. Oh, I'll be honest and love you well. She took her father by the arm. The sun's passed from the bench, father. Come in. I'll build a fire on the hearth if you want. And Cawdor, that's it. You like horses, that's what I'll give you. You like mine, but I'll buy you better. Morales has a pair of whites as beautiful as flowers. We'll drive by there tomorrow, like kittens they are. He followed her indoors. Blue kingfisher laughing, laughing in the lit boughs over lonely water. Is there no man not duped, and therefore you are laughing? No strength of a man but falls on folly before it drops into dust. Go, wicked arrow, down to the ocean, and learn of gulls. They laugh in the cloud. They lament also. The man who'd not be seduced, not in hot youth, by the angel of fools, million worshipped success. The self-included man, the self-armored, and never beguiled as to a bull nor a horse. Now, in his cooled and crag-like years, he has humbled himself to beg pleasure. Even power was better. Laugh, kingfisher, laugh. That is their fashion. Whoever has discerned the vanity of water will desire wind. And I will spare you any further reading tonight, as I can barely see this. I mean, I guess I can see it, but I'm holding a phone over the book while I try to read, and it's providing shadows on the text, which is not very pleasant to read. Much better in the daylight to read. So I will stop there. All right, Robs. Goodbye. Goodbye.